参れ。よいぞ。
主の世に見せてみよう。この感覚久方ぶりよ。良き太刀筋。
宝蔵院が槍術の妙、その身で刻めい。さあし合おうぞ。もっと撃ち込まれい。響きおる。
では見せる。鋭い力さえておられるな。
おい。よっ。
Hi all, Fuzzy Barbarian here once again. I posted a close combat damage build a couple of days ago which used Warrior of the East as one of the armor sets. In that video I mentioned I had originally started making the build using the Warrior of the West set but swapped it out midway through. Me being me, I couldn't help myself but to go back and see how different it would have turned out had I pressed forward with my original build idea. And I'm pretty glad I did, because it reminded me why I'd chosen Warrior of the West in the first place. Not only is it a slightly lighter set, but also it's a set with a ranged weapon, which means using it opens up options to get bonus perks from more armor sets. In fact, in this build, we'll be getting perks from 4 different armor sets. The Futatsu Dual Swords, which are a part of the Master Swordsman's Power armor set, are our primary weapon here. With 2 extra Master Swordsman armor pieces, this enables us to get the first 4 perks of the Swordsman set, and we want them all. Damage reduction of 2.6%, skill key reduction of 14.7%, close combat damage of 12.2%, and of course 30% extra skill damage when using Sign of the Cross. You can see the stats I've got on the sword here. I already said this build was the one I was originally working on, but even though I was going back to it, I wanted to make this a little different to the close combat damage build. For that, I thought I might slant this towards skill damage instead. To do that, check out the rolls I had on this same sword at the start of this build. But the thing I found out as I played with a skill damage focused build was that I used a lot more non-skill based attacks than I thought I did. and I mean a lot more. It was extremely noticeable how much weaker my playstyle became by focusing on skill damage, which really surprised me. The number of times you try to pull off a windstorm only to end up with a strong attack, or the amount of times you try to do a strike only to end up with a single strike, is more than you might think, and that's in addition to just using standard strikes. When those times happen, you really want to have close combat damage instead. Also, close combat damage buffs final blow damage. With only skill damage, your final blows will be weaker. Nobody wants that, I know I don't, so yeah, I abandoned that for close combat damage. So I re-rolled the skill damage based sword back to what you're seeing here. But I kept skill key reduction. Skill key reduction is a bit of an exception to the close combat damage versus skill damage rule. First of all, it is way easier to roll high skill key reduction than it is close combat key reduction. Most of the time, close combat attack key reduction won't roll higher than 11.9%. It can go as high as 25% though, apparently, which blows my mind, but I've never seen that. It's rare as hell, so if you do get a roll that high, don't let it go. Until you do get it that high though, usually skill key reduction is the preference. The other reason skill key reduction is still fine to have is because most of the key you tend to use, in battle at least, is against harder enemies. And most of the time I find myself using my most powerful skill attacks against them, like Windstorm for example. Windstorm is something you tend to do over and over against them too when you're using it. So that is precisely when you want high skill key reduction. But like I said, if I could roll close combat attack key reduction higher than 20%, that's definitely what would be on this weapon. I'd have no skill key or skill damage perks at all. The second weapon here is the Atagi Satamuni. That's there because it gets us 2 perks from the Kingo set. Damage reduction of 2.1% and final blow damage of 15%. On my ranged weapon, I have agility damage bonus of A+, as with this build you get more damage thanks to that. I'll talk about that in a moment actually and show you some test damage vids I captured whilst I was testing out the difference between agility damage bonus of A+ and familiarity damage bonus, so I'll show that in a moment. Our other ranged weapon is the Warrior of the West bow. With this and 2 other Warrior of the West armor pieces on, we get 2 perks that we want, namely extra damage reduction of 2.1% and the close combat damage of 12.2%. The final extra armor set piece is one piece from the Sonata set. This adds another 19% final blow damage. If you don't have Sonata, you can add an extra piece from any set you want to get whatever perk you want. This build already does a ton of final blow damage, so while it won't be as much final blow damage without Sonata, you can still add something else you might like here, even if only to get the added defense from it. This build has less tankiness than the Warrior of the East version, so you could even add a piece from, say, the Heroic Raging Bull set and get an extra 2.6% damage and 36 extra life. You could also put on a piece from the Fanatics armor set to get close combat damage when critical of 20% instead of final blow damage, and so on. It's your choice what you put on there really. As far as accessories go, I still don't really have any good ones, so I tend to go with ones that have the highest yokai close combat damage. This one isn't too bad as it also reduces yokai damage against me, including damage from behind, which is helpful. My Yasakani Megatamas all suck. This one sucks the least, but there aren't any real perks on there other than the set bonus requirements down one that I really need to talk about. The set bonus requirements is the best perk because it's thanks to that this or any of the best builds are even possible. I also made sure to get plus 35 attack on all armor pieces, that's the highest you can get. Look for gloves that drop from Revenants with inheritable attack on them of plus 20. At max familiarity, that means they'll be plus 35. I also go for life, toughness, defense, dash endurance, and key usage related perks on my armor. And I make sure I also have running speed on at least one piece. Core stats wise, I'm well over level 400 now, so you can see all of my core stats are very high, but that's irrelevant for this build. This build will always be one of the strongest builds you can use at any level. Obviously it will be stronger the more points you have to allocate, but that is true of all builds. But not all builds are worth trying when you're a lower level and still rationing out your points, but this one is. If you don't have the amount of points I have here, your priority should be skill and heart. You can ignore body strength and stamina to start with. It means you'll be heavier when you first start using this build than what I am here, but if you're low on points, you're going to want to think about your raw weapon damage first anyway. Dual sword scale on skill first and heart second, so concentrate on allocating your precious points in that order. I put only enough points into magic and dexterity that I need for the skills I want from those. You might even put in less and use less than I do, since I've unlocked some perks I don't often use these days, like Life Seal. I'll show you what they are in a moment. Basically, only put points into magic to get what you need to unlock a skill. Don't pour points in first and try to get your skills later and be stuck with leftover points. I pretty much look for the skill I want first, then I use my leveling up to get me the points I need to unlock the skill. I do this one by one to make sure I don't waste my Amrita on leveling up in an area that I don't need. Spirit only needs to be 10 to use our Guardian Spirit of choice, which is Kato. We love Kato for everything Kato brings to the table, that's for sure. Since patch 1.06, I rarely actually use the living weapon side of things though. It's just not as good anymore. Now, it's the perks that matter more than the living weapon itself, though Kato's still a good living weapon, just the same. My spirit is 25 here only because I've unlocked all the Guardian Spirits for testing purposes. I recommend you only do the same if you want a specific Guardian Spirit or have the excess points or want to play around a bit like I usually do. Notice equipment weight there of 48%, which is about 10% lower than our weight with the Warrior of the East version of this build. That's a big difference between this build and the last one. With this build you're much lighter. It means you're not as tanky though, so bear that in mind, but you get more damage thanks to the A+ agility bonus we have on our primary ranged weapon. I'll show you with some tests I did when I was wondering if agility bonus would be better or worse than familiarity bonus on a build like this. I also tested it against the same situation for the Warrior of the East version of this build, so you can see them both side by side. Okay, check out the tests. So yeah, you want agility bonus damage of A+ on your main ranged weapon, and if you're using Warrior of the West set, you're going to get a little more damage than if you're using the Warrior of the East set. Of course, bear in mind that the reason I'm at 48% is because I've maxed out stamina and strength. You'll be heavier if you can't do that. Just make sure you put enough points into stamina to get your weight under 70% at the very least while you're leveling up. Honda Clan is the clan of choice for both the extra skill damage and the damage halved. Here you can see all the special effects going on with this build. You're probably wondering how these compare to the last build I posted with the Warrior of the East set. Well, they aren't too different. The biggest noticeable difference is final blow damage has gone from 52.2% to 74.7%. In your case, if you don't have the extra Sonata set, it might be an extra 20% close combat attack critical, or whatever you get from the set you substitute for the Sonata set. But stats wise, not much is different on this screen. As far as skills go, make sure you max out all the passives on all the weapon trees. They will apply regardless of what weapon you're using. Dual sword wise, go for Sign of the Cross. You want to make sure you get Tacky Arts. Choose Momentum, the mystic art that reduces ki on subsequent attacks. That's really good for Windstorm. You want to unlock this tree here so that you get the Shrike and also get defense arts so that you get better ki recovery. Basically go for anything for better ki recovery in this build that you can. Anything else you want here. Make sure you also get these ki pulses where you get a ki pulse even when dodging. These apply regardless of weapon you're using as well, even though they're not listed as passives, but you want to unlock them all for high, mid and low stance. As far as ninjutsu goes, there's not a lot here as well. Make sure you get the mystic art so that you can perform any ninjutsu on yourself. That's enlightenment. You can also come down here and get Tiger Running, Dashing, Cloud Runner. Dashing and Cloud Runner are very important for heavy builds. You want the Quick Change Scroll, your Get Out of Jail card, and Dodging to reduce ki in evasive rolls. Basically, like I said, anything that's ki that enhances your ki for a heavy build you want to get. And also get Ninja Tool Mastery so you can equip all the ninjutsu that you want. Magic wise, there's a little bit more here than ninjutsu, but I've probably got a little bit more here than you will want or need. I always go for weakness and sloth. Both of those can help with farming. I've got Life Seal there, but I don't really use it that much anymore, but it's still a pretty good perk if you want it. Awakening is the ideal Mystic Art here because casting on yourself very fast is useful mid-battle. I also have a Water Talisman. Water enables you to do more damage with subsequent attacks once you proc water on an enemy, so that's a great one. Pure Mind for more resistance against Yokai realms. I used to use Steel Talisman a lot. I don't use it anymore. I just use it to unlock or put points in it to unlock Protection and Evil Ward. Carnage Talisman is still great despite the nerf. It's not as good as it was. Most stats taken so far seem to indicate it's still better than Power Pills. Yep, you can use Power Pills instead of this if you want. Power Pills won't reduce your defense, so if survivability is the thing, you probably prefer Power Pills under the Ninjutsu tree, but I still prefer Carnage. And also make sure you get Incantation Mastery so that you can max out the amount of magic that you can equip. As far as shortcuts go for all of those things, I pretty much run with Weakness, Tiger and Sloth. I don't really use Sloth that much anymore, but for farming I keep it there just so it's there and it's easier to farm hard double human bosses. And what you just saw me unlock: Water Talisman, Protection Talisman, Carnage and Quick Change Scroll. And don't forget to allocate your prestige points where you want them. For me, it's all into close combat damage perks. You can watch my other video in which I explain how to max those out to help you with that. I don't think there's any significant difference between how easy it is to get this set versus the Warrior of the East set. You get the Warrior of the West gear and the Kingo's Katana from the submission Invitation from the Warrior of the West. That's a level 190 mission, which is 40 levels lower than the Champion of the East mission where you get the Warrior of the East set. Still, despite that, I always found the Champion of the East fight to be way easier. So whichever one is the easiest for you, I guess, might sway your decision on which set you're going to go for. If you don't get the Kingo's Katana doing the Warrior of the West mission, I recommend just farming Revenants for it. It's a very common weapon. You also get the smithing text as a reward from the Conspirators submission. If you already have it, you can just forge one. You'll need a Centipede's Fang from the Silver Mines Writhes boss, but I don't think I'll go into that right here. If you guys really want me to make a guide on how to farm Centipede's Fangs, then post a comment below and I'll look at doing that. Just remember, the smithing texts for the armor sets we're using here drop in the same missions where you get the sets, and you want the smithing texts. The reason is, if you forge the gear, it'll cost you less in point allocations to wear the gear than if you get the sets off Revenants. That helps you to ration out your points better and not have to put them where you don't want to have to put them. For example, see my Swordsman's gear? The points required to wear it are Stamina of 13 and Strength of 13. Now here's the forged version, which shows a requirement of only 6 stamina and 6 strength. So yeah, forging is better if you don't already have the points in the attribute that the set requires, because it more or less halves the amount of points you need to wear it. Okay, so with all that out of the way, the real question is, which of the two builds is the best? The Warrior of the East version of this build or this one? I would say the lower the level you are, the better off you'll be with the Warrior of the East version of this build, as it will give you more survivability. But once you get to a point where you're feeling comfortable keeping yourself safe, then I'd say this version of the build is better. It's lighter, it's faster, and with the extra damage you can get from an extra armor set slot, as well as from the agility damage bonus working better, it makes it a more damaging build overall. It also might not be as tanky as the Warrior of the East build, but it still has a healthy dose of defense just the same. So yeah, I prefer this build, but feel free to fire off in the comments about which build you prefer. And that's about it. I hope you guys liked the video and got something out of it. Until next time, bye for now.